I'm Mike, and welcome to Retro Boost. This is the second part in an ongoing comparison series comparing RetroTINK to these other converters. So like I said in the first part, which if you haven't seen it, there's the link right there for you. In the first part, I was curious to test out these much more lower-priced scaling devices after seeing a lot of different articles that are asking about them, like, hey, how does this work for GameCube? Or is this good for this game here? How do they compare? It's really hard to pass up this thing. I mean, converters like this are very, very low-priced. This is a composite to HDMI 1080p scaler that is, at lowest price, $15 online, compared to RetroTINK, which is $130 or greater for the Pro at least. The Mini starts out at a lesser price, but still significantly more than what this guy has to its price point. So I wanted to compare them. So in part 1, I compared the 2X Pro against this scaler, the AV to HDMI Mini, set to 1080p, and kind of as expected, the 2X Pro performed better, giving a overall cleaner, clearer image, no matter what the cable source was. This takes composite exclusively, whereas the RetroTINK 2X Mini can do composite or S-Video. The 2X Pro adds component to that mixture, so those are superior cable formats. The image gets even better, but this device by itself, if it's all you had, you'd be happy with it. And there are comments that say just that, which is cool. It's good to know that it isn't complete trash. It's alright. It kind of reminded me of what it was like when I used to have to hook in my old consoles to my TV directly. I had a television that had one of those kind of breakout type cables, female RCA, that went into a 3.5 type jack directly into the TV. Wasn't the best, but it was tolerable, and that's kind of what this is like. We're going to keep the comparisons going though, this time comparing it to the 5X Pro. Now the 5X Pro, the price difference now is way more dramatic than it was in part 1. The 2X Pro is $130, give or take. This on sale is $15, big difference. Now we're looking at $15 versus $300. So the 5X Pro is a very advanced and capable device. It's more than just a line doubler like the 2X Pro was. There's so much more to it. Thanks to firmware updates, there are a whole host of different output resolutions you can use. There are unique sampling modes that emulate the different horizontal sampling of different consoles to give you the most true experience possible whilst giving you high definition output. They added custom scaling and cropping. They added high dynamic range. There's so much the 5X Pro does. Of course, it's going to do more than the converter for $15, but what does this look like? What does the $15 versus $300 look like on screen? That's what we're going to be seeing today. So again, it's not to put shame to any particular product or brand. I just want to see the value comparison of what it looks like to go from here to the 5X Pro in this instance. We're also going to be comparing a component 1080p converter, so make sure you subscribe to get notified when the future content comes out, let you know when that goes live. That'll be the next one that I do. So let's look at the 5X Pro. Setup wise, this is identical to the 2X Pro video. Capture, I've bypassed my Extron system, so everything's been hooked into the mini scaler here or the 5X or 2X Pro directly, bypassing the Extron system to make it as fair as possible since it's an external device. I don't want to hook it into that system, have it all be separated. And then the 5X Pro specifically is going to be set to 1080p fill, 4:3 aspect ratio, and unless I specify, it's going to be the generic 4:3 aspect ratio specifically, with sharp filtering for 2D consoles and smooth filtering for 3D consoles. That way we're just kind of seeing a out-of-the-box type setup, but we're gonna do a couple. We'll do an interesting thing with the Super Nintendo, kind of show what more you can do with the 5X Pro, so we'll get to that using SCART cables and the specific sampling mode for SNES, stuff like that. We'll do an example like that, but for the most part it's gonna be kind of out-of-the-box 1080p scaling, this versus the 5X Pro. So let's get started by, like we did before, we'll start off easy. Super Nintendo Composite 1080p versus 1080p on 5X Pro. Let's see what we're looking at here. So now we're seeing a very different side-by-side here. With the 2X Pro comparison, it was a similar screen-filling experience on both sides. We were just picking apart the clarity and color differences as each presentation continued, each comparison proceeded. With the 5X Pro, its side of the screen is very different. And that's thanks to the 5X Pro's ability to change its different sampling modes, outputs, 4x3, 16x9, etc. So 4x3 is awesome because the 2X Pro gives a more kind of fit-to-screen, screen-filling kind of experience like what the AV to HDMI does. Although now that we're at 1080p, 4x3 out of the 5X Pro looks quite good. I think that definitely helps it with the overall definition and clarity of the presentation by having that aspect ratio intact. And that's like what the aspect ratio is probably most appropriate for consoles like this, because they were coming out in the 4x3 era of TVs. Nowadays TVs are widescreen format, they're 16x9, so that's what modern consoles will also output. It's nice that the RetroTINK 5X Pro can give us 4x3 presentation, but in a 16x9 space. It's very cool. It's one of the advantages of the 5X Pro. So, definitely better. It's clearer. The colors are significantly brighter, more vivid. It's a very different flavor of color, though. It's funny how, like, the interior of the castle looks almost more like burgundy or even borderline like salmon than the AV to HDMI side. Like, it's a very different flavor of color too. And you can adjust that in the 5X Pro settings if you didn't like that. That's the other cool thing about the 5X Pro is how much you can tune and mess with. You can change the color settings, the color intensity, like the saturation, the gamma, the stuff like that. You can mess with all that. You can add scale lines to it. You can do so much with it. That's why it costs $300, because it does all these things. So, let's keep these comparisons going though. Let's check out what happens when we up the cable type. We'll go from Composite to S-Video. S-Video is pretty easy to get to use on like the 2X Pro or the 5X Pro. You have the option of like buying it with them, with those devices. At least I did when I bought mine. Otherwise, finding them secondhand, they're not as expensive as the other types of cables we'll talk about shortly after that. So let's see what S-Video does to the equation, as it is a better transmission method than Composite. Composite's very weak. Let's check out Super Nintendo again with S-Video. So much like with the 2X Pro, S-Video helped tremendously compared to Composite to give us added clarity through the RetroTINK device. The 5X Pro, when using S-Video on Super Nintendo, is really good. Like, it's very clean cut and I enjoy it quite a bit. Everything else is pretty much the same in comparison to the AV to HDMI. It still looks like the AV to HDMI just has this like kind of like film over it that makes it look like a lot darker and a little less defined than the 5X Pro does. So the advantage of the better cable type adding clarity, coupled with just the fact that the 4x3 presentation is just better, the 5X Pro is really showing off what it can do. But we can push further beyond. So Composite and S-Video are the two most kind of normally attainable options to try out a lot of these consoles, but there are other options as well, as I've talked about before on the channel. We can go into Component, brands like HD Retrovision and Retro Gaming Cables UK make component cables for a variety of consoles. I have the HD Retrovision SNES cable, so let's give that a shot. So component cabling through Super Nintendo now, side by side. We'll see how much we gain this time. So the RetroTINK 5X Pro coupled with Component out of the Super Nintendo is very, very, very good. That is like the closest to emulation that you can really hope to get out of the original hardware combinations like this, as I've said before. And I believe that so much that I made a video exactly kind of comparing that. RetroTINK side by side with like the Virtual Console, and the 5X Pro with Component very much well holds its own compared to the emulated version of the same game. It's very impressive. So the only issue here is price. So now we're in like a very high price tier for this kind of performance. To do a 2X Pro with like S-Video, not terrible in terms of price. I mean, obviously $15 for the generic converters, very hard to pass up, but that price tag is not unobtainable for a lot of people that are interested in this stuff. The 5X Pro with Component specifically, now you're talking like $370 or more depending on where you're getting all this stuff from. So it's a big investment. It's an investment that I made, and it hurt my wallet quite a bit, but that's the performance you can get for that kind of investment. I very much like what it looks like. We can also do an alternative. The alternative to Component are SCART cables. A lot of game consoles do support the use of SCART cables without having to mod the console itself. The Super Nintendo is one such example of this. So let's try out SCART RGB with the 5X Pro, since it also supports SCART. Again, get a lot of value out of that $300. Now we have another type of cable input. We'll do SCART RGB, and we'll also set it to 1080p over output mode, which is like a kind of CRT simulating output type resolution, where the image is now going to be all the way top and bottom, kind of fills the screen, and then some. Really, it kind of exceeds the screen a little bit. And then also do the Super Nintendo horizontal sampling mode. So a very different flavor of image than what you've seen before, but just kind of show off like all the different things you can do with the 5X Pro. Once again, we'll see what this looks like by comparison. Very different image there. So SCART is very appealing with the Super Nintendo. It's a very fun type of cable to use. I think it's very defined and very sharp compared to Component. Even when you're using generic sampling mode or the Super Nintendo sampling mode, it's very interesting. So that wraps up the Super Nintendo part of things. I think the 5X Pro has a ton of things to offer. It definitely, in my opinion, is better. I mean, no surprise there. It's a $300 advanced converter upscaling device, so it's no surprise it would be better or offer more than the $15 converter. But again, to give you an idea of what both can do, that's why we're doing this video. Let's move on to the 3D space with Composite out of N64 and GameCube, just like last time, and then we'll also check out S-Video and Component after that. But first, let's check out N64 and GameCube. So 1080p fill and the smooth filter out of the 5X Pro here. First, Composite.
Hello!
toadstool. Peach.
Sigma Alpha 2 heading due south over the city. We're en route. Everything's a go.
This is Control Tower. We have you on radar. Report cargo status of captured Hedgehog aboard. Over.
That's a 10-4. Cargo secured on board and... What? The
Didn't copy
Hedgehog
that.
is
Over.
gone. It's taken out everyone aboard and...
What's
How
wrong?
in the
Come
world?
in. Over.
Freeze! What do you think you're doing? Get that Hedgehog!
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
Huh. No problem.
So for both N64 and GameCube, the 5X Pro and the AV to HDMI are actually kinda similar, like more than I thought they would be. The N64 has proven a pretty tough console to improve the quality of like this with HDMI, well, digital conversion rather, and stuff like that. I've like almost never really been totally happy with it no matter what method I've used to date. Although I will say that I think the 2X Pro so far, with S-Video specifically, has been kind of the best that I've seen personally yet. Maybe because line doubling to 480 versus scaling to 1080 is better for the N64 specifically. But here's what we can see. Kind of like before with the 2X Pro video with this, the color is definitely different on the RetroTINK side of the equation. Mario still looks like his liver may or may not be failing with his skin tones, but the other colors are probably a little more appealing. The blue on the title screen background I think is more vivid and pops better on the RetroTINK side of the equation than the AV to HDMI mini side. Clarity-wise, they're pretty similar, although the 5X Pro, upon close inspection, does have like better definition and smoothness overall to it that I think is better. I mean, in particular, like the Bowser kind of the Bowser like boss fight kind of demo portion, I think really speaks to that. Bowser just looks better on the RetroTINK side of the equation. Text clarity wise, they're pretty much the same, like when the screen is on, like on-screen text and whatnot, so overall pretty simple. The prognosis here is that if you had the AV to HDMI mini and you have an N64, you're going to be happy with it, because even with the RetroTINK 5X Pro, not a lot of things are different here. You get a very different kind of flavor of picture when you make it like sharp sampling with the N64, well, sharp filtering rather with the N64 horizontal sampling output mode. I don't like it personally, but there are other ways you can attack the issue. Scan lines probably help as well, but as far as this just raw comparison here, they're pretty even. For GameCube, kind of similar. They're very close. The 5X Pro is brighter. Like, the color pops a little more in the gameplay. It's more noticeable, like the street paint yellow versus each side. But from a clarity standpoint, they're pretty similar. One thing I will say that you can definitely notice on both is that the motion is way better on the RetroTINK for both of these consoles, N64 and the AV and the GameCube. The AV to HDMI doesn't seem to do motion quite as well. There's a little bit of like kind of a combing effect that you can see when like Mario's head spins around on N64, or certain things with Sonic on the GameCube, like the helicopter rotors and what they look like when they're spinning. Little things like that I started to notice. It isn't terrible though. The Component video upscaler that I have, we can talk about that when that video comes out, because let me tell you something with combing with that guy. But for a composite with N64 and GameCube, the AV to HDMI is quite good. Let's step it up. So let's go to S-Video for both, but also for GameCube we can do Component. And with GameCube and Component, something very different happens with the 5X Pro. The 5X Pro is able to accept resolutions like 480p or beyond, and then take those to a higher spec like 1080p. The 5X Pro couldn't do that. So even though we were using component cabling with the 5X Pro, it was still an interlaced signal output. Now it'll be progressive based output with the 5X Pro. So let's see what all that looks like and then make our kind of final assessment.
Hello!
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
Alpha 2 heading due south over the city. We're en route. Everything's a go.
This is Control Tower. We have you on radar. Report cargo status of captured Hedgehog aboard. Over.
That's a 10-4. Cargo secured on board and... What?
Didn't
The
copy
Hedgehog
that.
is
Over.
gone. He's taken out everyone aboard and...
What's wrong?
What in the
Come
world?
in. Over.
Freeze! What do you think you're doing? Get that Hedgehog!
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
Just made it.
Sigma Alpha 2 heading due south over the city. We're en route. Everything's a go.
This is Control Tower. We have you on radar. Report cargo status of captured Hedgehog aboard. Over.
That's a 10-4. Cargo secured on board and... What? The
Didn't copy
Hedgehog
that.
is
Over.
gone. He's taken out everyone aboard and...
What's
What
wrong?
in the
Come
world?
in. Over.
Freeze! What do you think you're doing? Get that Hedgehog!
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
Yes! Just made it.
So what are we thinking with the S-Video part of it? Well, for N64, it definitely adds clarity. It definitely helps the 5X Pro give a cleaner overall presentation to the N64. The on-screen text is like the biggest noticeable upgrade there. Although, still far from perfect. I mean, the N64, like I said, just a tough console to improve. Something that I've been just dealing continuously with. The GameCube, now we can see a difference in the color. I think the color pops more because we've removed that composite video fuzz from the equation for the 5X Pro, and it pops a lot more. So that looks a lot better. So it's worth upgrading to S-Video, definitely, if you get a 5X Pro or a 2X Pro for that matter. Now for a component on the GameCube, huge difference, because now with the 5X Pro we can output progressive scan from the GameCube and get a much better overall base resolution to then upscale to 1080p versus what the AV to HDMI is capable of. And I mean, you look at like the opening cutscene, that helicopter, the word gun just like appears on the hull as the camera pans over because of how much better the definition and clarity is on the progressive scan side of the fence with the 5X Pro. Thought that was really cool to notice things like that. And again, it makes the color more obvious to see the differences of now that the layer of composite flavor has been taken away with the added clarity of the new cables. I did forget to mention that those are the Retrobit Prism component cables. They are very good, although they're definitely not perfect. Mine in particular came with the audio channels reversed. I talk about that in my second part of my component video review of the Prism component cables. So they're not perfect, but they are quite good, as you can see here. So what are we thinking here? Well, big price difference between the AV to HDMI and the 5X Pro. I mean, the base buy-in, $15 at the lowest for the AV to HDMI versus like $300 for the 5X Pro. If you're going to be using those better cables like Component or RGB SCART, that's like another $50 to $70 depending on where you're getting them from. So it's a it's a bigger price tier for sure. But is it worth it? Well, if this stuff is important to you, I think it is. It's important to me. I like this stuff, and I mean, there's a clear advantage in picture quality versus side by side here, but does that matter to you? That's the important question. I think for consoles like the N64 in particular, or even the GameCube, running composite, the 5X Pro specifically isn't that much better than this is. So if that was your only console, the N64 or the GameCube, you're going to be happy with this, because by comparison, what you're looking at here at least isn't like a ton better. Now there's more things you could do with it that I didn't show. I think obviously scan lines would probably help quite a bit with the N64 specifically, things like that you can do to it. The 2X Pro, however, I think is better for N64 specifically, especially when you couple S-Video with it. But it's interesting how, with just raw composite taken into account, this little converter, 15 bucks, kind of holds its own quite well compared to what RetroTINK has to offer. It's very interesting. It was only when we upgrade the cable type to S-Video or Component that it's very clear that RetroTINK is better. So that was really cool to see this guy holding its own punch for punch with like the composite stuff. So what's coming next? Well, got a lot of things planned here. Firstly, we're going to go up from the AV to HDMI Mini. This is a composite 1080p scaler. I did get my hands on a component 1080p scaler, so I'm going to compare that to the 2X Pro and 5X Pro, probably together because that converter can't accept anything below 480i, which knocks out Super Nintendo and N64 from being able to compare. So by default, RetroTINK wins. So we'll compare the other consoles though. We'll do PS2 and Xbox since we're in the component era now. And then also we're going to do an updated version of the 2X Pro versus the 5X Pro. I figure since I have all this new footage to play on, might as well edit that into a new comparison video series. So we'll do that as well. So make sure you're subscribed to get notified of when those videos drop. As always, I appreciate you watching. Check out what else I have on the channel to offer. We got controller reviews. We got some fun gameplay with friends, Retro Boost Arcade. You can see more of the RetroTINK devices like the 5X Pro in action with stuff like that. I do appreciate you watching though. Have a great rest of your day.